Leading global distributor Banijay Rights represents a world-class multi-genre portfolio of more than 180,000 hours of standout programming. Handling the distribution for media and entertainment powerhouse Banijay, the division specialises in the exploitation of premium scripted and non-scripted brands to broadcasters worldwide. Banijay Rights' catalogue encompasses a host of top titles from over 130 of Banijay's in-house labels and a number of third-party producers spanning drama, comedy, entertainment, factual, reality, family, formats and theatrical. Delivering high-quality IP which was born locally and travels globally, the distributor offers the best stories told the best way, with landmark brands including Survivor, Big Brother, MasterChef, Peaky Blinders, Rogue Heroes, Marie Antoinette, Temptation Island, Grantchester, Deal or No Deal, Home and Away, Mr. Bean and Black Mirror. Built on independence, creative freedom, entrepreneurialism and commercial acumen, Banijay Rights operates under the direction of Chief Executive Officer Kathy Payne. Banijay Rights, storytelling for every audience.
TellyCast.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to TellyCast. Hot on the heels of last week's TellyCast Digital Content Forum, sponsored by BBC Studios, I catch up with two of the UK's leading digital-first content execs, who are responsible for working with some of the most recognisable brands in entertainment, including Doctor Who, Top Gear, and kids phenomenon Bluey. It's coming right up on this week's TellyCast. So on this week's show, we have a double header from BBC Studios, two guests who are at the very top of BBC Studios' digital efforts. We have Jasmine Dawson, SVP of Digital Consumer Engagement, and we have Nat Poulter, VP of Digital Commercial at BBC Studios. Guys, welcome to TellyCast.
Great to be here, Justin. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Not at all, not at all. Great to have you both on the show. It was great to see you at the TellyCast Digital Content Forum last week, of which you obviously both did a keynote, which is fantastic. And we'll come on to talk a little bit about that later in the show. We always kick off the show, or usually kick off the show, talking about people's careers, which I think it's always really helpful to get a sense of how executives have got to the roles that they have. Jasmine, starting with you, can you give us a bit of a background to your career and how you ended up as SVP Digital Consumer Engagement at BBC Studios?
Sure. So I started in creative agencies and then moved into media agencies. So I really sort of say that I sort of honed my craft in the agency world, both in London and in New York. I enjoyed and still enjoy that pace and sort of the creativity that is driven by the pace of the agency world. And I also worked across so many brands and several industries. So from Revlon to AB InBev to British Airways to New York Times. Within agency roles, I also went in-house at several of these as well. But it really allowed me to understand the difference between that response-driven environment for brands such as the New York Times and Hulu, and also sort of branded models such as Revlon and Mars. I worked on scaled digital products where these brands were trying to become creators as well as drive their own revenues. And I thoroughly enjoyed working across these. My work won awards and recognition through Adweek, the Shorty Awards, and at Cannes Lion, as well as sort of leading bigger and bigger teams. I think the difference between sort of working in London agencies and New York agencies was striking. And having spent 6 years in New York at what's now called Essence Mediacom, back then it was just Mediacom, I decided to return home for family reasons, but also because I had just found that I really wanted to move towards a values-driven business. And that's not to say that agencies aren't values-driven, but I do think that ultimately they are not in charge of their own destiny. And I wanted to be somewhere which was solving crunchy problems like I was doing for all of the brands that I was working on, but I wanted to do it at a place where I felt that had a values-driven business. And I also wanted to move closer to the content. Throughout my career, I've worked within digital. I've always been in digital, and it's always been close to the content business. But it's what really inspired me, and it's what I wanted to be able to make sort of the second part of my career about.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting, because coming from that brand-focused digital media agency side and having experienced work and culture and approach to digital and an approach to marketing, both in the States and in the UK, you're obviously pretty well placed to understand, how the whole digital content model is moving. So in terms of New York and in London, then, which centre do you think is more advanced in terms and more sophisticated, if you like, when it comes to brands investing into content and building their engagement with consumers through digital content? Which side of the pond is more sophisticated?
I think they're trying to solve different problems. You've got a smaller market in London and you've got smaller budgets, but I think there is potentially more innovation this side of the pond, because you need to do more with less. And I think when you're looking at smaller budgets and making it work harder for you, you're forced into creative thinking, you're forced into strategic partnerships to be able to get the reach that you need. Whereas in New York, I think it's a different set of challenges. I think you've got a huge market, but made up of very different territories who need different types of messaging, and one campaign can't solve for the entire territory. And therefore, localization and really clear state by state content strategy is really called for. So I think in terms of who's more advanced, I would say they're advanced in different things. I think sort of technology and innovation, I think, is advancing faster this side of the pond, but bigger creative, I guess, campaigns and the ability to join up with sort of fantastic talent and do things, such as with the Super Bowl or with sort of other sort of impressive sort of landmarks, is really where it's at when you sort of think about the other side of the pond. So I think, they both do very well in different lanes. And I think it was really helpful to get an understanding of like how to innovate with smaller budgets, because then when you in London and then move over to New York and have 10 times the budget, but the expectations of cut through and reach were really, really high in the US.
So how long have you been at BBC Studios now, Jasmine? Been here a couple of years or a little bit longer?
I started in 2018, so I've been here 5 years.
Right. Okay. And obviously seen a huge amount of change in that period, including the dreaded pandemic and all the changes that brought upon us. Now, Nat, welcome to the show. Great to have you on. And you're a much more recent addition to the senior team at BBC Studios. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, again, thanks for having us. Yeah, I was thinking about this as Jasmine was kind of running through her career. And to be fair, it's very much more by luck than design that I'm kind of sitting here talking to you today. I mean, I come from a long line of biochemists. My grandparents were biochemists and went to the University of Nottingham. My parents were biochemists and went to the University of Nottingham. And weirdly, I was a biochemist and went to the University of Nottingham. And I guess that kind of talks to you only know what you know, really. And I went there. I absolutely loved it, all the way up until my third year, where I ended up doing a placement and having to sort of pipette into test tubes day in, day out, and realised that actually I wanted to work around people. And so I kind of fell out of that degree, applied for graduate programs, which is kind of what you did back then, I guess. And I ended up joining the John Lewis Partnership Leadership Program and thought, what will give me more access to people than being at the cutting edge of retail? And it certainly did that. I lasted about 11 months there before I quit in a ball of flames, because I realized that actually retail teaches you a lot of lessons, and I couldn't quite keep up with the pace, I think was the honest truth of it. Yeah, came out of that and ultimately needed to pay my rent, and managed to fall in get a job at DMGT as an analyst. So DMGT back then was an amalgamation of some of the biggest websites and publishing sites in the world. They had Mail Online, Evening Standard, Metro, Piston Heads, Auto Trader, amongst others. And my responsibility was essentially evaluating how they were selling their inventory in sort of the global markets. At that point, they had a US and a UK sales team where they were selling direct to advertisers. But outside of those core markets, really, they were working with sales houses. And it was my job to try and optimize yields outside of UK and US. And yes, it was a very lucky point, I think. In reality, back then, majority of people were consuming their news and entertainment content through, websites and apps. Very different to kind of nowadays, where the majority of people consume their news and entertainment content through social platforms. But as a result, these sort of online publications were delivering incredible organic growth. Yeah, my job was ultimately to maximize yields. And I was there kind of around the advent of programmatic technology, where I was working with the likes of now Magnite, Spot Exchange, Talaria, etc., to kind of bring those technologies on board and monetize our audiences. And yeah, over time grew that to the single biggest revenue line across our business. It was $50 million or so, sitting day in, day out with some of the leaders of those publications and the publishers, which was a very exciting time at the age of sort of 23, 24. But towards my sort of end of the 6 years there, I saw that actually organic growth was starting to tail off. And the reason for that was ultimately social platforms were stealing audience. And I was very lucky to be able to meet our then founder of Jungle Creations, Jamie Boulding, and Mel Chapman, who was at that point, I think, Chief Content Officer, and joined Jungle Creations as COO. And we were about 50 people. We had a bunch of big Facebook pages, and we were pushing people off of those Facebook pages onto our websites, where we were monetizing them programmatically. So that's kind of where the meeting of minds happened. And yeah, we kind of grew that business over the course of 5-6 years. And it was very much a really exciting story, a roller coaster is probably a better phrase, of building a modern, diversified digital publisher. So by the end of it, we had a portfolio of vertical, social first media brands, twisted in food and drink, through to VT in news and entertainment, craft factory and crafting. And we built a diversified model that underpinned that, touching on advertising, branded content, brand partnerships, bit of e-com, and then also marketing services or agency business, which we called The Wild by Jungle. And yeah, we built that business to about 30 million of revenue and sold it at sort of 60 million or so EV in 2021 to a private equity business. And I then kind of exited from that business and started to have a bit of time on my hands to think about what's next. And it became super clear that the world had changed. We are in a world filled with a fair amount of economic uncertainty, an industry that's facing serious disruption. And I think the playbook has changed a little bit, where so many publishers have been focused on, maximizing the Google search algorithm or Facebook social algorithm to deliver reach. Actually, the pendulum is swinging more to sort of verticalized, specialized media brands and IP that's sitting at the heart of it. And yeah, I was very lucky to be able to meet Jasmine and the team and sort of see where Studio's vision was and where they wanted to go. And I really think, they're very well placed to build that sort of cross-platform digital consumer proposition with some fantastic IP at its heart. And so, yeah, 4 months in now at BBC Studios, and very much got the bit between my teeth. We've got some fantastic people creating some fantastic content across some brilliant IP, and very well placed to hopefully ride a fantastic wave as we go forward.
It's really interesting because obviously we had Mel on last week's show and she talked us through the development of Jungle Creations. So that sort of very neatly takes us up to date now and in terms of your career and also where we're going next. So we'll touch on that in a second. And just before we move on, now I've got to ask you, how did it go down at home when you decided to not be a biochemist? Are the family still speaking to you?
to be fair, they were very understanding. They realised that I needed to go and do something with a bit more energy and dynamism. I think the bigger issue was when I quit that graduate programme, there were a lot of tears. I mean, I can still remember my mum being like, how are you going to pay your rent? You've just applied for one of the most competitive graduate programmes and you've left within 11 months. What are you doing? That was the bigger issue. But we got over that, Hindsight is a wonderful thing.
There's lots of examples of people who have been really successful, particularly in the media industry, of coming through, lots of different, interesting, varied backgrounds and making that leap when it, to a parent, doesn't make any sense at all. But you're living proof that it does. So that's great. Just bring us up to date. We've just had the TellyCast Digital Content Forum, of which obviously BBC Studios was headline sponsor. So thank you for that. But when it came to your keynote, which was one of the key highlights of the day, you both presented, your vision in terms of the state and the future of BBC Studios. Jasmine, take us through that presentation and give us some of the key takeaways for people that weren't at the event.
I think what we were really trying to communicate was sort of three key things. So first of all, to Nat's earlier point, we are set up for success because we are sitting with fandoms galore who are passionate about our amazing IP, and knowing that we have brands across a diverse portfolio, we need to be able to harness these audiences to be able to deliver a sort of a multi-platform approach across digital. And by that, I mean, we shouldn't care about having to drive them to one place. We should know that our fans are passionate about our content, but they're going to prefer one place on one day to another place the next day. It may be on Roblox on a Monday and on TikTok on a Wednesday. And therefore, we shouldn't have that hierarchy. And that sort of second point on being really clear with ourselves that it shouldn't matter to us where we're talking to these audiences, and that we want to create a universe in which every platform is equal to us, and we are therefore adaptive, and we go where our audiences are. And that is something that is really defining our commercial strategy that I'm sure Nat will come on to. I think that third point is then being able to go deep with those audiences. We're lucky in the fact that we've got a global audience for all of our IPs, and that we can entertain them like no other, because we have the ability to create our own universes. So whether it be Bluey, whether it be Doctor Who, whether it be BBC Earth, we're in control of that, and we are able to be able to sort of create sort of something new on Instagram within a day. And therefore, what we'd really love to do is to be able to go further and think about what the audiences are going to want from us in a world where we create new themed sort of subscriptions for these audiences. So if they want to go further into sustainability and they want to be able to understand what they can personally do to drive change, BBC Earth is well set up to do that. If you're a Bluey fan, and I talked a lot about Bluey of my section, and you want to understand, Muffet and Fox, who are two fabulous characters on Bluey's cousins, who have the energy that none of us have anymore, but ultimately have created stories for themselves. If you want to know more about them, can we create a new universe on a platform for these audiences? So I think those three key things of sort of understanding that we have these fandoms that can power sort of our business, that we don't necessarily care about our hierarchy. We want to be where those audiences are, and we want to create fantastic experiences for them wherever they go. And that also we see new commercial opportunities for these audiences and fandoms that can take us into new areas, whether that be subscriptions, whether that be e-commerce, or whether that be something that we haven't even thought of yet.
It's really fascinating, the new opportunities and these almost content universes that are starting to be built across different platforms. And something you just said there is, central to the approach is basically going to where the audiences are. That must have been quite a fundamental change in terms of BBC Studios for a business that has become so successful on some of the world's biggest brands, but at the end of the day, born in TV, essentially. And that model, to a certain extent, hasn't changed a great deal over the last sort of 20, 30, 40 years. But what we're talking about now is something much different. And essentially, it's working with all the social media platforms and going to where the audiences are. Can you talk us through that digital journey then for BBC Studios? How did the business first start to get involved with digital content, and where we are now and where the business is going in the future?
Yeah, I can take that. So I think when I started in 2018, digital was very much seen as a marketing endeavor. And I was a significant shift in the type of people they had hired before. I was someone that had been commercial and digital sort of all of my career. And I had been working on significant deals and trying to make brands creators in themselves, and working with the likes of Twitter and Meta and YouTube to create revenue streams for these brands. Coming into a world where digital was seen as marketing, and that you had a fantastic team who they're fans themselves. You've got massive fan bases within our team who know the audience as well, know our content like the back of their hand. And there was a directive to look at what the potential could be if we started looking at digital not just as a marketing function, but as a potential profit center. I took that as a sort of mandate to go, okay, it shouldn't just be about the money, but it should be about unlocking the potential of what our audiences can do. And if we start listening to them more and understanding how they want to engage with our content, then we can create a content-driven business, which was seen elsewhere within the organization in BBC Studios production. We wanted to be able to show the scale that we could have and look at a business that could be driven by our talent, our audiences, but then also going out and finding new talent and new IP. The crunchy problem that sort of BBC Studios are trying to solve is also one that's also a group sort of crunchy problem as well, is that relevancy issue, and making sure that we do stay meaningful to consumers today. And that is very much placed in lots of different areas within the business, but I definitely see a healthy amount of that challenge being sat with me, because whilst not every part of the business can say, I don't have hierarchy and I need to go where the audiences are, we certainly can. And we can show that by doing that, we can be a sandpit in which we can test new formats, we can test new brands, and then we can understand what the potential is for the rest of our business to look at these and take them elsewhere. I think coming on 5 years now, we can see that marketing is essentially an upshot and a side benefit of what we do, which is looking at a content pipeline that can drive our portfolio, that can diversify across multiple revenue streams. But that is still very early doors, and it's taken a lot for us to move from where we were in 2018 to today, because we are a big business, we are complex in how we run, but ultimately it has been about setting that mandate top down, and for us to be able to have the direction, but enough of a space to test and learn. Because we can't do everything that, for example, Nat did at Jungle, because we have rules, we have rights, complexities and things like that. So we need to operate in a very different way. But it's exciting. And for me, that crunchy problem of staying relevant with audiences, maintaining that sort of meaningful sort of space within our audiences' sort of hearts and minds is something that is going to keep me here for a while, because it's not going to be solved overnight. But I think we've moved a long way in 5 years, and I hope that in another 5 years, we'll be sitting here talking with you about the amazing sort of global content business that we have built. We found new talent, we found new brands, and we have uncovered new innovations along the way.
what I find really fascinating about this is that BBC Studios is a legacy business, huge business, as you say, lots of some of the world's biggest entertainment brands. But here you are being pretty entrepreneurial, actually, and taking a leadership role when it comes to monetizing content through digital. And there aren't many other production businesses out there in the UK that are doing it. Certainly not on the scale that you're doing it. Now, Nat, obviously you've come from a very entrepreneurial background at Jungle. When we look to the future of BBC Studios and how you see the business moving, what is it from your time at Jungle that you're going to be applying to the future for BBC Studios when it comes to how you're going to do things differently, and also if we can talk a little bit about the commercial model?
I think the first thing to note is that there is an appreciation across the board at all levels that the world is shifting at 1,000,000 miles an hour and there is a need to innovate. You were saying before that, these were brands that were born on TV, and there's an appreciation of that, but there's a knowledge now that younger audiences are consuming the majority of their content across short form platforms, and there's a need to innovate to reach those younger audiences. And interestingly, I spoke in the keynote a little bit about the advent of various technologies, be it the smartphone, 5G, or indeed AI, sort of accelerating those content consumption changes. And they've happened at a real pace. And the whole kind of amalgamation of that theme means that we're in a world now where the ecosystem, the distribution ecosystem, is just so fractured. And there is now a requirement to tell really interesting, compelling stories about or through the lens of your brand IP across those different platforms. I think the other thing to take away from that as well, if technology has accelerated content consumption trends and we're now in a place where distribution is fractured, I guess the other key theme that we've seen massively shift is that kind of reach to community piece. And I think, so many publishers, and I said it right at the top, but so many publishers thought that they owned their audience, right? Like you look at old school news publishers, they had X number of page views coming day in, day out. And then when Google changes its search algorithm, their page views to site drops. Or equally, if you had digi publishers that were relying on Facebook traffic, they change their algorithm and things shift. And I think there's just been a realization that actually X number of followers or X number of page views doesn't necessarily mean you own your audience. You're merely kind of renting it in this modern world. And so that's the big theme, right? If we're moving from reach to community, the desire now is you really need to tell compelling stories across these different platforms, publish with intent, right? So you're not cutting and copying a TV program for YouTube, or equally, you're not taking a YouTube 30-minute episode and cutting it for Insta. Like fundamentally, you're publishing with intent to tell the right story on those platforms to those audiences and build loyalty. And then I think that is ultimately the point of uniqueness, or the true sort of value that then fuels your commercial model. So hopefully that answers the first bit. The second question was kind of, what does this commercial model look like? Where are we going? And I think we're at a place now whereby, this sort of IP is going to be that golden thread that connects all of those different and disparate platforms. But if we can get to a point where we have meaningful audiences across these platforms, and to Jasmine's points, we have relevancy and right to play on those platforms, we'll be in a really strong position. And the vision is we end up being able to engage audiences across the various different social platforms. And that could range from YouTube to Facebook to Instagram to TikTok. Indeed, we recently launched a partnership with WeAre8, the sort of mindful social media app. But it could be newsletters and podcasts. And I think that's probably the other end of the scale, right? That's more around a more sort of intimate experience, less passive, more sort of people searching you out, more pointed viewing, more sort of meaningful relationships. And that is kind of the whole circle as I see it. And once you've got that loyalty and you've got that fandom, your job is then mobilizing those fans for commercial endeavor. And at the minute, and to Jasmine's point, every business is very different. And so you can't copy and paste a commercial model. And given we are truly global and we have a whole host of different IP from BBC Earth through to Top Gear through to Doctor Who, and the list goes on, it could vary significantly by brand, by market. But the vision is in the world of BBC Earth, you're working either with brand advertisers, and that could be talking to them, trying to understand how they want to build their brand in partnership with yours, and delivering sort of an integrated content proposition. And the most obvious one could be, for a BBC Earth, a 30-minute long form, perhaps even longer, 30-minute long form YouTube series where we discover really interesting things about the natural world and the fantastic wonders of humankind living on YouTube, told through the lens of BBC Earth, but in concert with a brand and aligning on values, and then sort of cutting that down for different platforms. And so that could be a behind the scenes video of kind of the shoot that lives on Instagram, where people are discovering more and trying to understand more, through to TikTok, where we tell sort of explainer videos around specific segments of that content. And indeed, that could then be amplified through adverts that sit across your website, or there could be sponsorships on your podcast and your newsletters. So the objective, and I'm saying a lot of words here, but the objective is really to try and build this like cross-platform story through your brand, and then weave a brand really authentically through that. And that's the objective.
It sounds like almost a mini universe per brand, if you like. And you talked a little bit about some of your brands, and actually let's talk about that, because you've got these worldwide recognized brands like Doctor Who, and okay, so let's talk about Doctor Who. We've got it's an amazing brand known around the world. I know there's a new deal just been done with Disney Plus, which is incredible distribution, going to take the show wider and more international than it ever has been before. But you've got all this cast of characters over the last however many years of Doctor Who's been going. I should probably know this, but I don't, but it's been going a long time. So you've got all these iterations of the Doctor and all these periods of this show, but also you've got all the villains, and you've got all these amazing episodes. So even each episode, it has its own universe. So what you're talking about is pulling all these characters out and building stories around them, and taking those to audiences, the super fans who will be, monetizing it with them. But also it has a brand building role as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've definitely come a long way from cutting and comping our library of long form programming down for social. This is very much about creating digital original content for these platforms. So absolutely, we will have these sort of landmark TV programs that go out across our owned and operated channels, but equally third-party distribution channels as well, to reach global audiences, typically through TV or on demand. But then the objective is to create digital original content to dive deeper into those stories and build that fandom. But to the point that you were saying before, right, we've come a long way from just, like I said, cutting and comping content and then just selling ads against it, right? There's a whole host of different skill sets, capability, experience that's required. You are truly building a universe within each of these businesses, and it does require different skill sets, different capabilities, different backgrounds and experience. And it does take time, to Jasmine's point, to build that cast and that team to be able to deliver a really diversified, profitable media business. And that's the journey that we're on. It's still, fairly early days, at least for me. I'm 4 months in, but the thing that I feel buoyed by is the fact that all of the ingredients are there. It's now our job to kind of bring them together to make sure that, fundamentally we can build relevancy, build reach across these platforms, and then bring brand advertisers on that journey with us. But equally, there is also quite an exciting opportunity against some of the brands, be it a Top Gear, be it a Bluey, and perhaps further, to build digital consumer revenue. So that could be subscriptions, or that could be clubs. And it is just trying to work out, when you're looking at that brand matrix, what does the commercial model look like by market, by brand? And like I said, it's still early days, but all the ingredients are there.
So, Jasmine, when we come to talking about the production process for all of these mega brands, presumably you have digital content teams embedded almost in the wider production team, or as part of the wider production team, which is making content for these different platforms. Tell us a little bit about that. Are they a sort of a little cell within the team, or are they part of the general production team? Because actually that's quite a fundamentally different approach that more traditional TV production companies, smaller indies, probably haven't done too much of that so far. But going forward, we see the direction of travel. Presumably that's going to be something that they need to take much more seriously. So how do you create all this additional content within the actual production of the show?
Yeah, it's a good question, and something that we have been trialing lots of different ways of achieving over the last few years. So BBC Studios Productions make amazing TV day in, day out. We have tried embedding digital production teams within sort of their teams, but they're structured differently. They've got sort of a different sort of pace. And ultimately, what we found works best for us is having our platform specialists that are digital natives all in one team. They sit and report into Athena Witter, who's our VP of Content and Programming, and they're there to be able to be that bridge between our fantastic IP and the audience. And what they bring to the table is they understand our audiences, they understand the platforms. They also have incredible relationships with BBC Studios Production. And for me, it is less about how we are set up structurally, and it's more about behaviors and understanding sort of what everyone brings to the table. So we work very closely with the production teams to make sure that we are capturing content on set. We are then taking the content that we have and adapting that for our different platforms, but that we're also extending the story, and that we have that trust from the production unit to be able to do that ourselves. And we have that trust because we've worked with them for a long time. They understand our expertise, and they also understand that that's our part to play. And they don't have that skill set. They make amazing TV for, whether it be for channels, whether it be for streaming services, but they make high-end, premium, impactful content. And we can take some of that and adapt it for our platforms, but we also need to do what you said, which is creating that unique digital first original content. And we do that by being in charge of our own destiny and by having the relevant skill sets within our own team. And we do that well. We know we can do better in certain platforms, and we are still, we have a thriving YouTube business, and we're working very hard on building the right sort of skill sets in-house to be able to, really leverage our brands on other platforms, whether that be our We Are 8 partnership that we announced recently or TikTok.
And now it's time for Story of the Week, where my guests get to highlight the TV or content industry story that's caught their eye in the past 7 days. Nat, what's your story of the week?
So my story of the week would be about the wonderful Betches being acquired by Lab Bible Group. Jasmine and I were out in New York for Advertising Week a few weeks back, and we saw, I think it was the CMO of Betches sort of presenting their business. I've met the founders a few times. They're a fantastic, all-female leadership team that have built an incredible digi publisher, very much focused on female lifestyle and humour. They've got a fantastic business across social, websites, newsletters, podcasting, very, very heavy on the newsletters and podcasting piece. And that talks to kind of the loyalty they have from their audience. But yeah, impressive business. And Lab Bible Group have gone and acquired them, which obviously gives them a slightly more female skewing business, but also accelerates their route into the US. So definitely a story worth calling out, and very interested to see how that partnership goes.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting development, that not something that you would call as an obvious acquisition. And obviously, we haven't seen many acquisitions from Lab Bible for the last couple of years. So it's good to see them obviously making, what is, as we say, very interesting. So we'll keep our eyes on that one.
For sure, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that one plays out.
Jasmine, what's your story of the week?
So for me, it's something that hasn't come from a sort of a typical sort of industry press. It's in business of fashion. And this is Elf Cosmetics debuting their Roblox game. They have done some amazing things recently, whether it be sort of branded content they've done, whether it be their Super Bowl ad, but they are really gearing themselves up to become a creator first and a sort of, advertiser second. And for me, that is obviously the way things are going, is that, we're not just out there looking at sort of other broadcasts and other publishers. We're also working with brands, and whether they're working with us or setting themselves up as sort of a creator in their own right. I find it incredibly exciting and also incredibly innovative from the Elf team.
Yeah. I mean, they've been doing some amazing work in the digital space, haven't they, Elf Cosmetics? And they're probably the leader, aren't they, in terms of brands, having a vision and really leaning into digital and being very brave. And it seems to be paying off for them.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think there are other beauty brands on the platform. So Fenty's on the platform, NARS is, Urban Decay. But I think all respect to those brands, but they're dipping their toe in and sort of trying to understand what they can do, and they're experimenting. Whereas I feel that Elf really knows their audience and they're sort of understanding what they want to do. It's a new experience, this Elf Up sort of game. It allows players to become startup entrepreneurs in their virtual areas, and they're themed to the company's hero products. And I think it sort of goes to that point of like, know your audience, understand the kind of behaviors on the platform, and adjust your content strategy in hand. They've also brought some fantastic Roblox creators in, as well as Twitch and YouTube and TikTok creators in. They just are so fantastic at understanding their audience, but also understanding how they can adapt to each of those platforms. They're definitely the leaders in innovating within digital. It's one of those ones which I'm always keen to see what they do next.
Now it's time for Hero of the Week. Nat, who's your Hero of the Week?
My hero has to be the fantastic Jamie Boulding, my old boss and founder of Jungle Creations. He's been waiting in the wings, I think, for the last 12 months while he considers what to do. And actually last week announced the launch of PackChat, his new venture, which is a sort of mindful social media app that's focused on bringing friends and sort of your closest people together. And I think there's definitely a space for it. His LinkedIn post really spoke to the benefits that come from bringing people together in the real world, and flies in the face of kind of what could be said, a lot of those social media platforms are becoming homogenous messes of short form, algorithmically surfaced content from people maybe you don't know or don't care to know. And yeah, he's flying in the face of that. It's definitely a big swing, this one, but if anyone's going to do it, he is. And so I'm very intrigued to see how he gets on. He's just about to close his friends and family round. So if anyone's excited or intrigued, then please get in. I'm very happy to see that and happy to support them as well. So here's to that.
All right. Well, we'll put a link in the episode description to that story. And who or what are you telling to get in the bin, Nat?
I'm currently sitting here in my office looking out at a very rainy landscape. And so I'm going to say British weather can get in the bin. I struggle with the shortening days and the dark nights and the rainy weather. So, that can get in the bin.
Yeah. It's kicking in now, isn't it? It's really kicking in. Yeah, we all need a bit of help from some sort of one of those lamps on your desk, right? Yeah. That helps you with the SAD.
Indeed. Christmas is on the horizon, so perhaps all those bright lights of the Christmas tree will keep us going, but then we'll have to make our way through January. But so be it.
Christmas party season is upon us as well, so we look forward to that and seeing lots of friends and colleagues. Jasmine, who's your hero of the week?
So I was going to go with Corey Marsciuto, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Elf Beauty, and I think obviously sort of some crossover there between my sort of my choice of story of the week. But I think someone that can take risks and isn't afraid to test and really think about their revenues and their sort of their commercial strategy second, and think about sort of throwing their brand and their content out to creators and their audience to be able to define what's next for them. I think they have had a sort of mandate to disrupt the norms and shape culture, and they really are going community first. They've got a positive and inclusive community, and they're really building upon that with their new innovations.
Yeah, fortune favours the brave with Elf.
Absolutely.
And who or what are you telling to get in the bin, Jasmine?
Oh, I struggled with this one because I don't like sort of like naming and shaming. I feel like naming a hero is a great thing to do because there are so many people in the industry that inspire me, whether I know them or not. It's sort of putting something in the bin, I would say, rather than someone or something, I would say the notion of presenteeism, which possibly is not something that we were sort of wanted to sort of get out of us, but I think that there is the notion that you can now adapt to whatever you sort of need to in terms of work-life balance, and I think that presenteeism that maybe shows up in other industries, but I really want to put that in the bin because I think there is something to be said being in charge of your own destiny and you deciding where you need to be during the week. So sorry if that doesn't follow the exact mandate, but that's what I will share.
No, that's fine. For a minute, I thought you were going to put going in the bin, which would have been the first. So, Jasmine and Nat, it's been brilliant to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining me on TellyCast this week. It was great to have you as part of the TellyCast Digital Content Forum as well. Fabulous. I wish you both all the very best of luck with all the changes and the developments and the future of BBC Studios. It's really exciting to watch what you're doing. There's obviously new Doctor Who coming up, so we'll be really looking at all the digital extensions of that amazing series. So, Jasmine and Nat, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for this week's show. If you came along to the Digital Content Forum, thanks for attending. I really hope you enjoyed it. We have the key takeaways from the event as a feature article on telecast.com right now, so please check that out. And we'll be announcing the next TellyCast event very soon, so please keep your eyes peeled for that. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in London. Next week, my guests are Jasmine High of Red Bicycle and Fraser Ayres of Triforce Productions as we discuss Black history on TV. Until then, stay safe.